just 12 quick days, Israel, with the aid of the U.S., broke down much of the leadership, both of the IRGC, the nuclear program for the Iranians, brought down most of the nuclear facilities, and destroyed the leadership of both the religious and military Iranian government. But according to Iran, Yair, the Iranians have won the war. Believe that.
I know. I see celebrations in the squares in Tehran, and they claim victory over Israel, over the United States. They claim that they forced the American army to surrender, basically, to reach a ceasefire agreement with Israel.
We're living in a bizarre world.
And, Mati, where is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei? The supreme leader is gone from the face of the earth.
Well, I think there's one person who knows for sure. Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
And very likely he's going to tell us sometime soon. So, guys, today on the TBN Israel podcast, we are talking about everything that's happened in the last 12 days and why the Iranians are trying to doctor their unbelievable defeat into a victory. What the geopolitical story that happened behind it, how much they truly suffered at the hand of Israel and the U.S., and why they were willing to come to a ceasefire so quickly. We're living in a radical and a fast-paced time. I think in the last 2 weeks, I was talking to someone last night, I feel like in the last 2 years, I've lived 5 lifetimes.
Exactly.
And in the last 2 weeks, it's been a whole nother one. It's been unbelievable breakback pace of both news and military operations and bombings. We came out of 10 days of being shelled by Iranian ballistic missiles. I was in reserves. I came out. I went back.
Wow.
It's been a blitz of a couple weeks.
It's been days and nights of reporting what's happening and what's going on here. I bet you guys watched Mati and myself a few times a day. And thank you for joining us. Guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, by the way, hit that subscribe button and help us share the truth. Because what's happening now in Iran is the exact reason that we are here updating you on what's really happening. Because if you open Al Jazeera and other, pro-Iranian news reports and TV channels, they won this war. And they won this war, but the satellite images show that their nuclear facilities are all blackened. Their missile production sites are not existent anymore. And the leadership has completely changed from one side to the other.
The leadership is all dead.
Yeah, there's no more, they reappointed new leaders. And what's happening on the ground in Iran is that they are trying to find all the collaborators. We heard reports of 700 Iranians that were arrested on suspicion of espionage for Israel. And so far, maybe, what is it, Tomer? 300 of them were executed?
Today,
this morning. Just this morning?
So, a week ago, we were talking about this. And I think we both were speculating that we're going to find out in retrospect how much assets or how many assets on the ground Israel actually had. And it's twofold. It's one, Israelis, Mossad, special forces that are on the ground in Iran. And
Which is super cool. Just heard that commandos were on the ground in Iran. This is officially
they might still be. So,
exactly.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. And then the other side of that is you don't have that level of live intelligence without having collaborators internally. And we've had collaborators in the past. I mean, we know this is a fact that several of the best known or most dramatic assassinations that Israel carried out in Iran in recent years were carried out by collaborators within Iranian society, some of which didn't know they were working for Israel, by the way. But that's sort of business as usual for Mossad and many, let's call it clandestine operations. But here it gets more interesting because the number of targets that were hit, even on day one, were in the dozens of targets per day.
Yeah.
And it was live intel. It wasn't, we believe that they go to this office. It was at this hour of this day, they're in this room, in this house. And every time they moved, we knew where they were going. So we're talking...
And many of these assassinations were carried out in the personal cars of the IRGC officers.
So
were exploding.
So we're talking SIGINT, which is signature intelligence. So meaning we penetrated probably cell phone networks. Everything I'm saying is, by the way, speculation. I'm sure the book will come out sometime soon by someone.
With more advanced details. Things than what you're saying now.
Further detail. But so it means we've penetrated the cell networks. We knew their movements. We were able to track their movements in live, probably using a lot of electronics and AI. And the second part of it is human intelligence. Being able to track these people by people collaborating on the ground and also to get real-time damage assessment reports. So because what we did... And this is interesting. Israel bombs many of these targets using, jet fighters. We're not using strategic bombers. Many of these targets, we have to come back 5-6 times to destroy the target. And in real time, we're getting reports on how deep the bomb went, how much damage it caused, and how many times we need to return and what we need to target on the site.
Exactly. Meaning that we had people on the ground that are spotting, that are looking, that are assessing the damage and making sure that it is destroyed completely before we are calling another strike, so not to waste more ammunitions.
Yeah.
So basically we pushed all of the missile launcher capabilities of Iran from the western side of Iran, which is closer to Israel, to the eastern side, which was less affected by these strikes, even though Israeli Air Force pilots did also strike in those areas, like around 2,300 kilometers away from Israel, which is the longest that Israel ever struck in an aerial campaign.
Which is about 1,400 miles, and also, to be clear, way outside of the operating range of an F-16, an F-15, or an F-35 that's fully loaded with bombs.
Exactly. But now we upgraded the range of these bombers, basically, with, I don't know, advanced fuel and stuff like that.
I think that's a story worth a video of its own.
Definitely.
Didn't we talk about this last week?
What? We did.
2 weeks ago.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, that Israel retrofits an F-35. It's anyway, the technology here is very interesting. I think it in itself is worth a lot of research and conversation. But here I think the important
we should do some explainers just on that.
We will
multiple about this strike, about this 12-day of operation against Iran. I think it's worth digging deep into what really happened. And I think every day we get more information of what really happened on the ground and the level of intelligence that Israel had in this operation.
It goes back to this conversation we've been having, where for years now, probably over a decade, in our military budget every year, there's an allotment for building up the army against Iran every year. And some years it's, a couple $1 billion, some years it's more, and it's publicly known and publicly stated by the government. This is adversary number 1 for Israel, and number 2, 3, and 4 are proxies of that enemy. And we prepared our army for this attack for many, many years. We didn't know what they were doing with the money. We assumed probably some intelligence, some bombs, some Air Force capabilities.
Anti-rocket defense systems, that's expensive.
Yep. And then we find out that aside from that, we built essentially an entire army of intelligence operatives on the ground in Iran. And these people have given us, unbelievable depth and accuracy of information that allowed us to surgically remove the vast majority of the religious, the military, let's call it IRGC, the terrorism, and the nuclear leadership of Iran.
And also the anti-Iranian police, like the Gestapo of the IRGC in Iran. Exactly.
Yeah. I left you a list of everything Israel did that we know, at least. If you want to go through that it's in purple.
Where is it? What color?
Yeah.
Purple? I'm not good with colors. If you guys saw the video of us shooting at the balloons, it's like, shoot the purple balloon. Boom, I'm shooting the blue one.
So here's, I think, the thing that then we sort of need to stop at or start with, which is today, we're sitting here, and we need to tally what Israel's been able to do to Iran. Mm-hmm. And this kind of war isn't a war of annihilation. It's a war of symbolism and strategic targets. And Israel, in the first days of this attack, we knock out all their military, the IRGC, and the nuclear program leadership. That's in day 1 and 2 and 3. We knock all of them out. We're talking several dozen people that are killed on the first days, many of which are funneled by false information sent by Israel, funneled into hideouts that we knew they were going to go to, and then we eliminate them in their mountain hideouts. That's 1. 2, we knocked out all the air defenses within the first 4 hours of the attack.
More than 100 people.
On day 1?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that many.
Pre-designed hit list of 100 top nuclear scientists, military commanders.
But I think that's over multiple days, Tomo.
That's on.
You're talking about the list that came out on last week's
13th of June. That's
that in one day.
That's the strike, yeah.
I didn't realize it was
Operation Narnia. That's how they called it.
Wow. So we do that.
I like the names.
We knock out all their air defenses, and then we start going after the strategic targets: radar sites, nuclear plants, centrifuge centers,
missile ballistic
international
factories.
airports. They don't have airports right now. The second day, 14, it showed that they also destroyed the gas field that is still burning until today.
Wow.
It's very hard to extinguish a gas field, apparently. We don't have any here in Israel.
On the 15, here, that's the 15.
I'm looking at it. Precision strike in central Tehran killed the IRGC intelligence chief, Mohammad Kazemi, and Deputy Hassan Moha. That is a hard name.
Mochagachech. For Iran.
Mochage.
Listen, I think,
Mochage.
Mati, I think that this war, I stretched my
Your tongue twisters.
my Persian to the limit. It was hard to say all these names.
Anyway, so what we did there is we achieved absolute air superiority. And this is something you don't see anywhere in modern conflict. Just to give context, Russia's been fighting the Ukraine for over 3 years. And they have number superiority, they have technological superiority, they have the upper hand in manufacturing and in volume of weapons, and they still can't fly undisturbed over Ukrainian skies 3 years in. Israel, in 2 days, reaches air superiority over Iran, and the Iranians are equipped with the best, well, almost the best of Russian supplies. And we've knocked them out. Again, it's been a longer operation since the beginning of the war, specifically in several operations early in 2024. We knock out a lot of their air defenses. We continue to do that now. We're flying, and the images are insane. Flying midday in squadrons of jets, flying over the skies of Tehran, undisturbed.
Yeah.
And the Iranian people, we know this because the Iranian people are posting this to social media.
They're filming it, yeah.
Yeah. And you can see the jets as if it's like the Independence Day parade.
Exactly.
Flying over the skies of
I
Tehran.
think also refueling jets not far away from Iran.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing on a technological, on a logistical, and on an intelligence level. And then it continues. We start knocking out all the nuclear facilities, all the SAM sites. Then they start counter-launching ballistic missiles.
But then they get new people and we kill them also.
Yes.
Like
We
a
kill them.
butterfly
Like the second wave of leadership of the IRGC were also eliminated, and then the third and the fourth wave were already afraid, so they were like hiding, not functioning so well
on
in
June,
terms of this
Yeah, look,
attack. We heard reports, Tomer, that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei ordered multiple strikes of thousands of missiles, but the order was unable to go down the chain of command because there was no chain of command at that moment until they were reappointed. It even got to the point that he himself appointed 3 potential successors to take control if he is assassinated. This is how bad it is. And then they are now celebrating in the streets, thinking that they have won this war against Israel, against the United States. It's just, I don't know, unreal.
We're not done with the list, though.
Yeah.
So we got air superiority. We killed all the leadership. Then we killed the replacement of the leadership that was killed. Then we took over the strategic sites, which is nuclear plants, SAM sites, all logistical facilities, etc. Then it gets worse. Cyber attacks. And some of these things are hilarious because it's like the 5th time in 2 years that it's happened.
No ATMs, no cash withdrawal from major banks.
But you remember in previous attacks, it's not just that they shut down the systems. When you go to an ATM or a pump at a gas station, it pops up a message against the government. Thank your leader, thank the supreme leader for the fact that you can't withdraw money. Things like that. So there's always a sense of humor in these kind of things. We do that. So cyber attacks and reportedly sewage flowing in the streets because we've hacked some of their water systems. So again and again and again
and
on every
purpose,
front.
we hit the main Tehran
Sewage facility.
Yeah, and from that moment, Tehran was filled
with raw sewage. And I need to explain why we're doing this. This isn't a game of bullying the Iranian people. This whole thing is not trying to destroy Iran. It's symbolically bringing down the government with the stated goal of Israel allowing the Iranian people to replace their own government.
Exactly.
And the U.S. says the same thing. We want to weaken them. We want to weaken their perception of power, of influence. And we did this by eliminating their leadership time after time after time and showing that all the money they've spent, think about this from the mind of an Iranian, for 30, 40, 50 years, and 45 years, they keep hearing the same thing. All the money you're missing, all the inflation, all the sanctions, it's because we're going after the Jews. Let's show you how we're going to get after the Jews, and then after we're done with them, with America.
Yeah.
And what do they have to show?
This is the plan. This is the plan. This is the ring of fire around Israel. Look at our amazing proxies. Look at the missiles. All these videos that we've seen coming out of underground tunnels inside mountains with submarines in mountains and missile launchers and drones and military parades. And now nothing at the moment of truth against Israel in this war.
No.
Everything collapsed. And what's cool, Tomer, right, is that the prison of the opposition was also struck, but it wasn't struck in order to terminate all the prisoners inside. Only the entrance was struck so that the prisoners would be able to escape. So I don't know if as many were escaped or not. Tomer, do you maybe have information on that?
No, we don't have, but I know that a couple of the main guard or the main killed in that day. And apparently we're doing those precise eliminations with drone strike that could go free above Tehran. Most of our drones fly free, low altitude in Tehran.
We had 2 drones that were downed in this operation, right? That's like our military losses in this campaign.
No, I mean, so let's be fair. So the Iranians are trying to take the images of what they were able to inflict Israel with and inflate them to look like they were able to cause significant damage
with AI, by the way. AI images also.
Far more than what they actually did.
Yeah.
And I want to be honest here. Iran did manage for multiple days to launch ballistic missiles that did penetrate our air defenses. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, it took them, it depends on the night. Sometimes the ratio was several dozen rockets to get just one through the air defenses. And many of the ones that made it through the air defenses were already partially broken by the time they hit the ground.
So it's like fragments of the rocket.
Fragments of the rocket that caused the damage. And on several occasions, and this is sort of like the best of the best that they only have a limited supply of.
Cluster rockets?
They had cluster ballistic missiles, which is, by the way, typical for intercontinental ballistic missiles, to have multiple warheads. Because the way they operate, it makes sense when they re-enter the atmosphere to have...
Separate them.
Exactly. Several warheads, and it makes it really hard to track. One, because of the speed. Two, because it can recalibrate its angle of entry when it comes back into the atmosphere. So look, Iran did cause damage to Israel. They're trying to create a picture as if they brought down like the country. And in reality, there was damage caused. There were people killed, civilians that were killed by this attack. There was damage to both, I don't know if I would even call it military facilities, but things that are connected to military bases, etc. And a lot of houses in central Israel that were destroyed by this. But it doesn't come anywhere near what Israel did to the Iranians. It's the equivalent of they managed to get through a couple pebbles out of like everything that they were planning to bring. And Israel essentially took over their country from the air, from the sea. And then when the U.S. stepped in, I mean, it was just almost like open hunting season.
Exactly.
They had nothing that they could do against the attack. And literally, if Israel and the U.S. wanted up till this point, we could continue systematically bombing every building in the country undisturbed by them. That's how much of a dominance there was, how much of an imbalance in power there was.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, I think that the Iranians and the Arab world now is comparing like the damage that Iran did to Tel Aviv to the damage that is done in the Gaza Strip. There's like, I see posts in Arab media, social media accounts saying Tel Aviv la Gaza or something like that. Yeah. It's like comparing the two, which doesn't make any sense because in Tel Aviv, children are back to school now. There are a few houses and areas that were hit, but you cannot compare at all. But it doesn't matter. If you lie and then you spread this lie, that's what people believe. And for them, it becomes the truth.
So I have an interesting equation that I've been hearing several people who are very interested in talking about this in recent days, where there's something in the psyche of, let's call it the Islamic or jihadist movements, where they refuse to ever admit defeat.
Yeah. And we see that in Gaza also with Hamas.
And the point that was made was, and I think this goes against a little what we're taught in Israel. In Israel, we used to say, especially when I was much younger, that the Arab countries, and this is partially true, they never admitted defeat to Israel in wars. But in reality...
Egypt still celebrating winning over Israel.
Yes. Again, that's in 73. And partially that's true, but by measuring their actions, the Arab League, which was, let's say, from the 40s through, again, it wasn't officially formed in the 40s, but let's call it the idea of Arab, Pan-Arabian solidarity, going back to like the 30s, 40s, and then especially in the 50s and 60s, it has this idea that they're going to bring down the state of Israel. And then the metric was very, very clear. We will succeed when Israel ceases to exist. And they failed at that, and they essentially admitted that failure by signing peace agreements with Israel.
Yeah.
First, you have Egypt that does it. in a very bold way, then the Jordanians, and by the way, we were on the cusp of doing the same thing with the Syrians later on. In the early 2000s under Prime Minister Ehud Barak and then Assad in Syria. So they sort of admit what happens nowadays is you look at this like these Islamic or jihadist movements, they refuse to ever admit defeat. And it doesn't matter what happens to them, as long as they've inflicted you some kind of damage, they describe it as a win.
Yeah.
Hamas does it in Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is, it's dominated by the Israeli army. They've lost almost all their fighters, and yet,
many of their houses.
Yeah.
And they still do this like stages with music,
victory
parade,
parades
in the middle of rubbles.
Yeah.
That's what they do, just to, present an image of victory in an unimaginable situation. So
yeah, and so the Iranians are doing the same thing, and it's honestly understandable in their case. They built a propaganda machine, and since the late 70s up till this day, they're telling their people that all the sacrifice and all the pain and all the lack of freedom, it's all going to pan out one day. It's all going to be worthwhile because one day they're going to bring down the small devil, Israel. And then after they do that, they're going to bring back down the big devil, which is the U.S. And they've said this clearly. They frame it in like a religious apocalyptic sort of framework of, this is sort of part of our end times theology, and there's a lot that goes into that on like the Shia Islam side of things. They build this whole narrative around it. Here it's coming, we're going to win. And then in a 2-year span, they lose everything they've built. They lose Hezbollah, which is diminished to a fighting force so weak right now that they publicly stated they won't support Iran in this attack. They lose Hamas. They lose most of the Houthi assets. They lose much of their IRGC. And now with this attack, they lose both externally and internally the perception of their ability to stop Israel or the U.S. and to cause damage, which is very substantial.
Yeah.
So they go from being a top dog regionally who can disrupt and stop trade and cause a lot of damage.
And sell drones to Russia and like be like a power that you negotiate to get weapons from, make decisions with, to just being humiliated on the international level here.
And it's very dramatic for them. They've lost also a lot of their religious leadership. So
135 of them in the last day. And the day before it was the television. You all remember that?
Yeah.
National television. So it's all the symbolic leaders and all the signs of government. They're lost publicly.
Even the square of Palestine, that there was a huge countdown clock of when they're gonna destroy Israel.
The destruction clock.
Even that we explode and destroyed.
Yeah, and again, it's all these symbolic figures, and these people. You need to understand this. They're like the pop idols of the people of Iran. Qasem Soleimani, who's previously like removed by the U.S. This isn't a guy who's just like a clerk in the government. He's a national symbol that people look to and have posters of and say, this is the guy carrying out our theology of destruction, and we're funneling all these resources at him and watch the success of what he did. He's using Hezbollah and et cetera, and all these different proxies that he's using. Then we remove in the last couple days of this attack, we remove let's call the Qasem Soleimani of Hamas and the Qasem Soleimani of Hezbollah.
Yeah.
His not predecessors, his successors are both removed from the place, from life essentially, and
the place of this earth.
Yeah, and people know that, and they're aware of the public and symbolic significance of it. Mm-hmm. And so on every level they're losing, and now they need to save face.
Exactly.
They need to show, and we've talked about this. They need to show some kind of semblance of, look, it's not all that bad. We were able to cause damage. And honestly, they did cause damage, but it's not comparable. It's not in the same game, almost game field. They're fighting with primitive weapons. Well, it's not really primitive. Ineffective weapons, and they're playing defense, and they're unable to stop any type of attack on them. And again, the difference is they could keep attacking Israel for months. We'd be able to stop them. We could attack them every day and fly over their skies time and time again, and the U.S. could too, and they have nothing to stop us from doing that.
Yeah, not a single plane was downed during this war.
Which is amazing.
Only 2 drones, which are unmanned aerial vehicles, meaning no human. So it's money, but that's it. And Tomer, the war is not just affecting Iran; it's affecting what's happening now in Israel as well. I mean, most of the areas that were under fire, the war areas, are farmlands, because that's how Israel operates. Like on the borders, we have farmers with crops, and these are the areas that were attacked. So there is a shortages, first of all, of food, of crops, and of work for people. So the people of Israel have lost a lot of financial abilities. They lost a lot of resources, a lot of food. So one thing and one organization that is cooperating with us in order to help the people of Israel in this war is called Leket. Okay, what they do is pretty cool, Mati. So they go to hotels, to farmers, and they purchase the over food, the surplus of the food, the crops before it's thrown away. And then they have this very, very sophisticated logistical system that is efficient in giving this food to the people that need it most in Israel. So every donation that goes to them gives almost 3 times more in value if you would have gotten the food from a shop, if you bought it. Yes, exactly. So I really like this method because it's wise. It's not just going and getting the donation, buying the food, and then giving it to the people. It's creating a logistical system that prevents waste and then helping those that need the food the most.
So I have a personal piece here.
Yeah.
I recently was talking to one of the officers that serves in my unit, and he was explaining to me he does food distribution in a certain population. And I was trying to understand how he got the food. Did he buy it? Was it donated? And he said, no. And he was explaining exactly this logistical chain and named Leket by name, explaining how they essentially prevent the food from rotting on the fields and end up bringing it to people, which is amazing. And it's done in a clever way where it doesn't inflate prices in the market and it doesn't deflate the prices either. So make sure that people still make a profit and actually helps the farmers do better and not allow the food to go to waste. So I think it's a very holistic, a very smart way to approach this whole problem, and it helps a true problem in this country. There are a lot of people who've suffered terribly from this war, and let's be honest, Israel is a country of diversity. We have weaker elements in our society that always need help. Immigrants, people of minorities, both religious and ethnic. There's a lot of people in this country that need help on a regular basis, and the government doesn't do enough and can't do enough, honestly, to help all of them. And this is an amazing solution that does it in a dignified, in a loving, in a non-wasteful kind of way, which I think is just beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. So guys, if you want to be part in helping the people of Israel get some, decent meals to the table and save the waste of food and crops that are being, not used, you can go to mealsforisrael.com. Again, that's mealsforisrael.com. I think you can see it here on the screen as well, and help feed the people of Israel during this time. We always talk about what's happening in other countries that are launching attacks against us. But here in Israel, the people need help, and this is a way for you to help them. And by helping them, you're also helping us, because we are partnering with Leket. Okay? So thank you so much for that. And Mati, are we going to see a revolution in Iran? Like another revolution?
Not yet.
Back to the people?
I'm afraid. So I think this is worth explaining to people. Israel hopes, and the U.S. does too, that there's a government change in Iran. But this government has a death grip on the people of Iran that has existed since the late 70s. And they have a very substantial number of people that are part of the secret police, the Basij. They have a lot of people that are loyal to the government. What we're trying to do is publicly destabilize the government. Give them a chance to push back on that government. Give the people a chance to see the weakness and the vulnerability of that regime. And then hopefully they can push for reforms, they can push for a change. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think we're going to see in days or weeks a violent coup that overthrows the government. But you could see a very large public outcry for change of government. And then you could see the government respond, and they've done this in the past, by making concessions, by saying, look, we'll promote civil liberties, we'll appoint someone of the people, for the people kind of thing, someone who's a public leader. And that might be the stepping stone that's needed to get to the place where there's an opposition that now becomes part of the institution. Because the problem up till now is with these kind of totalitarian governments, they eliminate, and by eliminate, I mean they assassinate everyone who's in opposition to them. Same goes in Russia. You go to elections, and there's only one candidate every single time.
Exactly.
And anyone else who tries to make themselves a candidate mysteriously disappears or has...
Or the number two is also, aligned with number one.
Yeah. Or exactly. Or they say, look, we've brought some.
Yeah, we have two candidates. Look, this guy that doesn't know how to speak, and then Putin. You know.
So look like Khamenei disappeared.
He's in hiding.
Or
I think he's still afraid for a fallout or an assassination now that is against him. So I think he will be hiding for a few weeks now.
Look,
or that he's in
President
a bad
Trump,
mentally.
President Trump said that he knows where he is, and that he chose for now not to eliminate him. And my guess is also Israel did most of the time know where he was, and left as sort of like a last piece of like, if this doesn't stop,
Yeah.
we're going to do this. I think the destabilizing force of that would be very, very dramatic. And there's always that fear of if you eliminate the number one, especially when it's like a spiritual and like practical leader, when you eliminate them, it causes chaos, and you sort of have trouble then engaging with any one entity on the other side.
Exactly.
Because if the country is similar to what happened in Iraq, if you eliminate the number one and the party falls into infighting, let's call it the revolutionary party in Iran falls into infighting, factions fighting, you have minorities that start rising up against the government, you try to negotiate with them, there's no one party you can negotiate with.
Exactly.
Then you're in trouble. For years, you could be fighting against, small factions.
Yeah.
Shias, that are still fighting the Baluchis internally, that are fighting the Sunnis internally, that are fighting the Kurdish minority. So there's always that question of what happens next when you eliminate them.
Exactly.
Sometimes you make the right decision. Hassan Nasrallah being removed in Hezbollah was the right decision ultimately.
Well, Hezbollah is not the ruling party in Lebanon. They have a government, they have a parliament, they have a president.
They do now.
Yes. Well, they had back then also, so there was something to fall on. It was a puppet, yeah.
It was a puppet government.
I know, yeah.
That's true. Hezbollah was not the majority stakeholder in the country. In Iran, they're the only government that's existed in our entire life.
There is no opposition.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's merit to the fact, one, you need to understand these things take time. Two, we've done the right thing. We've shown vulnerability. We didn't hurt civilian population intentionally. And we were also very public about that. Prime Minister Netanyahu gave multiple interviews in English. By the way, some of them to Iranian journalists.
Yeah. But Iranian journalists outside of Iran.
Yeah. Obviously.
Most of the opposition is not in Iran.
I don't. That would be interesting though. See Iranian national television interview Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Exactly. So how do you talk about this loss to the war against us? But Mati, what I'm curious about, what potentially can happen, is we have hearing reports about this dirty bomb that Iran can still achieve, like a basic nuclear weapon, and maybe they can assemble it on one rocket and then still be considered a superpower with nuclear capabilities,
Love the name.
even if they only have one dirty bomb.
Dirty bomb.
It always is possible. But Iran isn't the only entity that has enriched uranium to a certain degree. The fallout from that, it's important to note, it isn't what people see in in post-apocalyptic television shows or movies. It isn't like a nuclear winter. The real damage that comes from nuclear or hydrogen bombs, whatever derivative of a nuclear bomb you have, is the chain reaction. And that's really where it happens, where the magic, quote unquote, happens.
Yeah, because then the atoms start blowing each other.
So people look at like the Chernobyl disaster, and they imagine, that's what's happening, what's going to happen from a dirty bomb. That's not what happens from a dirty bomb. A dirty bomb just spreads radiation over an area by blowing to pieces what was the nuclear, or let's call it the radioactive material. And it does cause damage, but it's controllable damage. It's controllable damage in the sense that, one, it could cause death, but it's not long-term. Two, you can clear the nuclear fallout, as in whatever falls on the soil. You can clear it. You can clear the contamination away. Again, it's expensive. It's damaging. Yeah. And then you can also, and we do that. We train this in the Army. You give people radiation pills to prevent the damage. It's not what people imagine of, it blows a crater and then it's a nuclear winter and, a city's gone. That's not how it works. So that is a threat.
It is scary.
I don't know. I feel like the Iranians are not, they still have the government and they still make a calculated decision when they make a decision. And if they were to launch something similar to a nuclear bomb on Israel, what would Israel do in return?
Yeah.
Retaliate.
For sure.
And we have, according to, official sources at this point, we have submarines that are parked off the coast of Iran. They have on them Jericho missiles or other missiles that have
nuclear
warheads, tactical nuclear warheads. And so again, so what are they going to try to gain here? Are they going to say, look, we won, and then the next thing you know,
They don't have a city.
They don't have a capital city.
Exactly.
So it would be a very, very uncalculated risk on their behalf. By the way, again, people write doctorates on this topic. There's an acronym. Thank you, Aaron, our writer, for reminding me of this. An acronym called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction, and which is the reason that since World War II,
no atom bombs were used.
No atom bombs were used, and no superpower went to war directly against each other. Is because you're assured destruction if you enter a full-on war that includes nukes. And it doesn't matter if you won on a tactical level, you lost on a strategic level.
Yeah.
So no one ever uses the nukes. Israel has them, according to whatever, all the sources at this point. We're supposed to in Israel
According to also Iranian sources.
According to many sources and many people that have said so, Israel has nukes. The U.S. does. The French do. The British do. There's all the Indian do. Many people have nukes. They've never used them. And the reason is because once you use them and your adversary has even just one submarine or one cruise missile in the air or one jet fighter in the air that's able to launch one nuke, then whatever damage you cause to that other country, by the time your missiles have landed in the other country, you have missiles in the air that are about to strike your capital.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, I'm going to cause millions in death on the other side.
It's going to cause
same thing's going to happen to you.
Definitely.
So that assures you never use those weapons. What it does, though, is it's sort of like a get-out-of-jail-free card, having nuclear ability, which is why the Iranians wanted it. Because you become, it's not untouchable, you become directly untouchable.
You become North Korea.
Exactly.
For Iran.
Perfect example.
That's it. Yeah.
It becomes very, very dangerous to mess with you.
Exactly.
Even if you have just a handful of nukes, even if you're a deranged government like the North Koreans are, it still doesn't matter. It's very dangerous to deal with you now because even if the U.S. attacks North Korea, for instance, they launch a nuke on South Korea or on Japan, which they've talked about doing in practice doing, that in itself is enough of a deterrence to stop it.
Yeah.
It was funny that Trump yesterday or the day before, he got really mad at Israel in the beginning when we sent the
about 52 planes to Iran, like after the ceasefire, and they said, bring them back, bring the planes back now.
And then he was happy because he's like, the planes was full of ammunition. They're going to bomb the out of everybody in Tehran. But I stopped them and told them to get back. And
it was funny. I said like what he said, like they had our bombs, the best bombs in the world, but I told them to go back.
What we were planning as a last strike before, after we got hit by and civilian got killed.
I don't know if it was the last. We have
multiple targets.
We have many strikes
more.
and many targets.
Yeah.
Israel didn't even begin, and neither did the U.S., really causing substantial damage to Iran. Everything we targeted up till now were symbolic targets or elimination of
threats.
Threats. People who were threats.
They still have the Navy. We didn't touch their Navy. They have a huge Navy.
We destroyed the
base,
port.
like a port,
But not
the ships. Yeah. And what is very, very interesting, Mati and Tomer, is that we saw images of trucks going to Fordo before the strike. Did they take out the enriched uranium, like the 60% enriched uranium, out of that site and hid it somewhere else?
Let's give a disclaimer before we go into this topic.
Uh-huh.
There's a whole lot of conspiracies going on what actually was communicated between the U.S. and Iran, both directions. So remember, when the Iranians strike back against the U.S., they warned them in advance.
Yeah, they warned the Qataris, watch out.
They directly said, FYI, we're going to be sending missiles to this base at this hour.
14 missiles just to, match the big penetration bunker busters.
And everyone understands what's happening. Look, we're about to attack, and you can expect this to come, and we want this to be clear that it's symbolic and we're not actually planning to cause damage. Take it as you want.
Yeah.
The U.S. evacuates their people, no one's hurt. The same can be said, to a certain degree, for the nuclear facilities in Iran. Fordo, Natanz, what was the other one? Isfahan. A handful of them were, according to Iranian sources, there were very few people killed in those facilities when the attack takes place. And there are reports that they removed a lot of the enriched uranium in advance. And if you think about it logically, I would have done the same thing. They hid them in different places. The thing is, we know from the reports that have come out and intelligence, I think they're intentional leaks that come out from different countries that say, one, much of the enriched uranium and the manufacturing ability, the centrifuges, et cetera, are broken underground now, and they're buried under rubble. And then what was removed, we're tracking. We know where it is. We know where it's going. It's just a question of time until Iran gives it up. And in that sense...
Also, I think they need to have something to give up in a nuclear agreement. Like, okay, here are the centrifuges. Yeah. Now you remove the sanctions. So they need to give something to have a deal.
I think from what I understand, most of the centrifuges are destroyed. I think it's the enriched uranium that remains. I don't know what percentage of what they had remains, but let's guess that, let's say, at least half of it remains, which isn't that much. We're talking tons. It's not, a crazy amount of material. So let's say they did that. It still doesn't matter that much. It's not like they tomorrow are making a race for the bomb. More so, we're in a place right now that because we've already fought and because the U.S. was already engaged in this conflict in an active capacity, because of that, the risk for Iran in violating the ceasefire agreement is 100 times higher than it was before there was an agreement.
Yeah.
Because now there's no mercy. If we said we're stopping this war for you to do this, and then you immediately turn around and violate it, then there is no reason to show restraint.
We already struck there before. We already operated for 12 days above the skies of Iran. Why not do it again? It's easy. It's like open market. I don't know. Open season. How you say it?
Open hunting season. So in Israel we don't hunt, so we don't have that. We don't have enough animals. But when you think about it from that way, also the psychological barrier for the U.S. government, for the U.S. armed forces, for the U.S. people even, it isn't like this big thing now. If there's a follow-up attack, it's just a follow-up attack. We've already done it before. So there isn't no dramatic moment of like, I can't believe we did this.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to launch 10,000 rockets at us at the same time? That was the fear for years against Iran. That was the perception that they have. Yeah. That was their abilities.
Here's where you see the difference between, let's just call it first world armies and air forces, and between what Iran has. Israel has shown, and the U.S., we know they have this ability. Mm-hmm. They have banks of targets that are not static in the sense that we have past intel and real-time intel on these targets. And when the moment comes of attack, it doesn't take more than just getting the pilots in the planes and pushing the buttons on the ballistic missiles to hit all those targets. And those targets can be power plants and dams and buildings of government and hideouts for different government officials. It doesn't take much. Once there's a consensus of,
you violated
the ceasefire agreement. We're going, those Israeli planes that according to President Trump are over 50 in number, let's multiply. Let's say there were 4 bombs on each. So that's 200 targets plus drones plus
just in one sortie.
Yes,
sortie, right?
Yeah,
not a shorty.
Good word, yeah.
I know. I learned. That's one of. They think this is my word for this war.
Shorty is a term from American hip hop.
Yeah, right. Hey, shorty, it's your birthday. Exactly. So, Mati, okay, we had or have still commandos on the ground in Iran. That's like amazing. And when you say commandos, you mean between 18 and 21-year-old Israelis from the IDF that are on the ground in Iran. That's just crazy. It's like not Gaza, but in Iran.
Can I tell you something, Yair?
What?
I feel in this war I was born in the wrong generation. we trained and in the mind of an 18-year-old who doesn't fear death, we trained for years for exactly these scenarios and never in our wildest dreams imagined that any of this would happen. And some of these, and I say this with the utmost respect, Israeli society, we've talked about this extensively. We used to talk about these gen whatever they are, people.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
And we'd say, oh, look, the TikTok generation, TikTok generation and the Instagram generation and stuff like that, they don't have the resilience. They're not the same thing that we used to be in the past. And definitely when you go one generation back, they're not the same, they're not as hard as the previous generation.
Exactly.
Look,
not true.
We have now in Israel, we have 22 and 23-year-olds who have more battle experience than any special forces unit in the world.
Exactly.
This is it's amazing. You look at this. We're talking regular infantry battalions and regiments that have more battle experience in more war fronts than people that are, the top of the line in, let's call it top tier operator forces, Navy SEALs, Foreign Legion in the French Army, whatever special forces.
Green Beret, blah, blah, yeah, all these names.
These guys have now fought in multiple countries in 2 years.
Exactly, 18-year-olds from a normal infantry unit that fought in the Gaza Strip, then 3 months later in Lebanon, 3 months later in Syria, 3 months later in Judea and Samaria, and now some of them, like the commando units, in Iran. And I think that soon the next thing will be in Yemen against the Houthis. So just imagine the scope of the experience for these 20-year-old, and then young adults, whatever you call them.
Our chief of staff, Zamil, he drops a bomb. Figuratively, by the way, not literally.
He dropped many, by the way.
Yeah, many literally, but in this case, just figuratively speaking. And he says, just FYI, he doesn't name the exact number of the unit, but I think we all know who he's talking about. And he says, we had commando forces on the ground in Iran. And we knew about Mossad agents.
Yeah, we knew about special commando that are connected to the Mossad, but this is IDF commando units.
Yeah, and we know some of the, well, I guess I know this from, let's call it from not official sources, but this is in the secret. Some of the Mossad assassination units were in Iran, which makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then we know that it's the regular army now is on the ground in Iran. And there are a handful of special units in Israel that, originally speaking, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, their operative mission was to fight. It wasn't Iran. It was against the Iraqis and others in the region, to go and take out the airfields and lays on the targets and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're talking like the regular army that was on the ground there. And it just shows you how brave our army was in this operation, how amazing the intelligence that we were working with, and then to the level and depth of planning and logistics that took place. Yeah. And you look at that and you say, like, one, where is this army when we're fighting in Israel? But it just...
In Gaza. What happened on October 7th?
Exactly. But aside from that, just eternally impressed and almost at awe by the level of accuracy and boldness and precision in the operations. And I think as we're wrapping this whole thought up, we walk away from this. Israel now is in a different place than we ever imagined. Mm-hmm. And I often talk about the fact that, that history isn't linear. In retrospect, everyone looks at it and says, well, clearly Israel beat the Iranians. Well, it wasn't clear to us.
Not true at all.
It wasn't clear to us. It wasn't clear to us that we were going to decisively blow Hezbollah out of the water in the way we did. It wasn't clear to us that the war against Iran would be so swift. Look, 12 days to bring down the number one top-tier adversary in this region, someone who was the fear of every army who fought here. Think about it this way. The UK, the French, multiple international companies were willing to bend over backwards not to go into conflict against the Iranians for fear of what they would do to their ships traveling in the sea. And in a matter of days, Israel annihilates their air defenses.
With a tiny air force.
Yeah, with a tiny air force.
With old planes.
Some of them old.
Some old, yeah.
Some old, some new. All of them American-made.
With female pilots, by the way, which is pretty cool.
Which is an advantage, not a disadvantage.
No, I know.
I'm just messing with you.
Way smarter than us, these females. Especially for me and Mati and Tomer. I could just ask.
Anyway, and you look at that and you say, never in my lifetime did I imagine it would be so successful and so fast. Even the Israeli government and army, when they played out the war games that were leading up to this moment, and I can tell you this from my recent experience in reserves these last couple of weeks, we were expecting far more civilian casualties in Israel. We were fearing more ballistic missiles would come through. Yeah. We feared the unknown. Iran has spent, again, it's staggering amounts of money, tens of billions of dollars for decades on building terrorism cells everywhere in the Middle East. And nothing happens. They're just unable to penetrate Israel on an intelligence level, on a terrorism level. It just didn't happen. Yeah. And you look at that and you say, thank you, on a spiritual level, that we're worshiping and we're following the right God.
Amen.
In this sense.
Yeah. Thank you, God. Definitely.
And that's one part of it. The second part of it is just to be very, very impressed by what our military was able to do, and by how weak the Iranian government actually was. And the third part is, and we always go to this place, is the Iranian people. We've now given them an opportunity. Our Prime Minister, and I have to hand it to him, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump have shown leadership of historical proportions in recent weeks. One, taking enormous risks. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, both Israel and the U.S. took calculated risks that could have ended up very differently. Yeah. With mass casualties and with fallen pilots within Iran and images that we didn't want to go to psychologically. They took huge risks. They did so quietly, with resolve. They spoke peace and they spoke calm to their people, and we withstood a very, very hard counterattack, and we did so without flinching as a people. And you look at that, and then we spoke to the Iranian people and said, we're doing this for you.
Yeah, and we didn't harm the civilian population.
Exactly. We intentionally avoided harming the civilian population. And if all our audience wants to take this to one practical place is pray for the people of Iran. Pray for the scorn and the evil that is the Iranian Islamic regime to be removed from that people and give them something different. They're beautiful historical people that have an amazing heritage that's been stolen and usurped by this radical and radicalizing government that has brought nothing but death and destruction to their own people in every country in this region. Mm-hmm. And now we have this historical chance where suddenly the skies are clear and you can look and say something good could be coming down the pipeline.
Exactly.
The next Abraham Accords, an agreement that brings Iran out of this dark regime.
Us traveling to Tehran pretty soon.
I don't know about pretty soon, but maybe in our lifetime. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know,
or Damascus. I want to see Damascus also, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And
cool.
The clouds clearing from over the people of Lebanon and the people of Syria, and something new that could happen to this region. And then it also gives a bravery to the other countries of this region to say, look, we can actually do the right thing without having to fear these people intervening in it. For the Saudis, for the Qataris, for the Emiratis.
Yeah, we can now have agreements with Israel without being afraid of Iran attacking us.
Exactly.
And on a positive note, out of all of this, Mati, the kids in Israel are back to schools after 12 days of war against the arch enemy of Israel. Just look at the quick turnaround and the resilience of the people of Israel in this war. It just is amazing.
It's both good news and bad news, depending on which child you ask.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's just like we've been battling the arch enemy, an existential war just now. And it ended 2 days ago, and today and yesterday the kids are back to school. Just look at how fast things are turning around and how the people of Israel are used to this situation. You know, I like to look at every situation and understand what God is trying to tell us in it. And when you look at Israel, what I get from this situation is, one, God is alive and he's performing amazing miracles today, biblical level miracles, okay, against all odds. This country, Iran, has almost 100 million people. We have around 10 million people here in Israel. They have more military personnel, more rockets, more proxies. Israel is still here. It's a miracle. It's a biblical scale miracle. Like the Bible, you open it, you see all the stories of Israel winning against all odds in Jericho, the Exodus of Egypt, and many, many more stories against the Philistines, the Amalekis, all these guys. Israel is winning because God is with us. And he's with us today, not because we're special, but because he is faithful to his promises. And he wants to tell each and every one of you that whatever challenge you're facing at this moment, doesn't matter how big it is, he can easily, like that, boom, turn it around into something amazing and find a new purpose for your life, okay? Amen. So what do? You pray, you trust in God, and you know that he is faithful and he is a living God today. That's why Israel is here. That's why we are on the map. That's why every time you open the news, you see Israel, because you see God's faithfulness and miracles. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what's coming next in this story unfolding here in the Middle East.
Only good things.
Yeah.
Only good things.
Okay.
Yair, this has been awesome.
Great.
It's good to be back.
See you guys next week from, I don't know, here at the US or somewhere else. Okay. Thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe, and make sure to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem.